What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Engineers Out Filters podcast. I am your host, Jacob Thompson, and today I'm still on the water train. It's been a long day of traveling, so we're doing Saturday recording again. It's not quite late enough to start drinking beer for me, so I'm still
It's
on the
five
water.
o'clock here in Eastern time, so whatever. Whatever.
Gub?
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I forget. I keep forgetting.
I know.
I'm Gabe. I'm drinking water because I went out last night with one of our friends and drank too much as per usual. We need to stop recording on Saturday, but we have all these
There's many conflicts recently.
yeah, there's so many conflicts that we have to. So I'm usually hungover.
Yeah.
And I am Dayton, and I am drinking the same shit that I've been drinking for a while, the Vista Bay hard seltzer from Aldi.
Ooh.
It's still the same pack that I've been working on for like 2 weeks now.
You don't drink enough.
I don't.
You need more problems in your life to like.
But yeah, it's still as good as ever, so I can't really complain.
And then who's that fourth person? That's not Joseph. That is Maxi Max.
I'm Max, and I'm drinking. Here, I'll show it up. A nice fresh two-hearted ale.
Ooh,
classic.
snap!
Yeah.
And a
Snap.
classic.
You can't go wrong with Too Harden.
No.
So
It's
I know what
usually,
you're
like, my
thinking.
go-to.
You've been waiting for us to replace Joseph for a while now. Unfortunately, he's just on vacation in Florida with his family. We couldn't make the recording time work, so we got Maxi this week filling in for him. So, yeah, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, that's right. He was on an episode before, wasn't he?
Yeah, Max has been on
Yeah.
the We Got Drunk episode. So you
And
might
he's on
remember.
the
Yeah.
spring break recap, yeah.
Yep, in the spring
What
break.
was the game we played?
So we played Most Likely To
Yeah,
most likely to.
yeah,
Yeah, that was fun.
with most of the house. Yeah, that's a good time.
Oh, it's a good game.
Yeah, welcome back to the podcast. As usual, you can find new episodes every Monday on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, and you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at EWF Podcast. Because we are on episode 55, as you guys know, we've been doing every multiple of 5. We've been doing an episode about STEM topics because, we should probably, if our name's Engineers Without Filters, we should probably talk about engineering and science a little bit. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about some STEM topics we found interesting recently. Yeah, so I guess I'll just do a quick intro thing. So I just got back. The reason I was traveling, I just got back from visiting Purdue, visiting their graduate program for nutrition, and it was awesome. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about that, but I got to give a shout out because I said I would to my host grad student Steph, and also you guys, Dayton, you'll appreciate this. Before you were vegan, dude, her family used to work for Sargento, like her
Oh.
whole family. So she's got that good cheese, you know what I'm saying? None of that Crystal Farms bullshit. All right. Yeah, she was an awesome host, and I really appreciate her showing me around and answering my questions about grad school. So that was really fun. And then, yeah, I got to see their program and talk to faculty about research and stuff, and it was really awesome. So I guess one of the research things I found really interesting. So one of the guys I was talking to, so he's doing research on how different types of fiber and cereals affect your gut microbiome, the bacteria in your large intestine. And one thing on paper does not seem like it would have a difference, but it does. So let's take like oatmeal, right? You can get like steel cut oats or like stone ground oats. You know what I'm saying? There's different processing methods, but still just like oats, right? And also, when you chew things, they become different particle sizes, and then you swallow it, obviously. But they found that different sizes of cereals will affect the bacteria in your gut differently. So if you cut it a certain way or a certain size, will have a different effect than if it was like smaller or larger, which I thought was really fascinating because you think if it's the same thing, it's just.
So what if I just swallow my cereal? Like, what if I just eat my cereal like pills?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. It's probably not gonna feel very good coming out the other side, but
Especially if it's Captain Crunch, dude. That shit rips you up.
Frosted mini wheats.
Oh god, dude. I don't even
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Oh, that would be the hardest one.
Sorry, when I say cereal, I mean like cereal grades.
Yeah, I knew what you
Yeah,
meant.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Just to be clear for the audience too, but yeah, it was weird. I wouldn't think that different particle sizes would affect it that much. And then right now they're starting to go into different processing methods. So yeah, if it's cut with like a steel cutter or if it's stone ground, different stuff like that, it'll have a different
So
response.
is it like smaller is better then?
So not necessarily. I asked him that. I'm like, so I would, is it smaller is better? He's like, well, smaller makes a bacteria produce different products than the large ones, but you need both those products. So
Huh.
it's not like you should chew your food longer or not as long. You really need all the different ones, which is why chewing you get different sizes um, before it goes down. So it's kind of a weird, I guess
Huh.
maybe you call it evolutionary. I don't want to say it for sure, but um, yeah.
Is it just because like if it's too big, like smaller bacteria can't interact with it or something? Is that what it kind
I
of
would I would guess, yeah, I'm not an expert on this to any extent, but yeah, I would assume that it has to do with the different, species of bacteria, what they're able to um, ferment, and yeah, the size
Mhm.
of the bacteria probably has an effect too. But yeah,
I
so
mean,
that was
it's
interesting.
kind of like in like the ocean, how you have like different sized fish, and the different
Mhm.
sized fish have to eat different sized like meals. If you
Yeah,
want to like, like the big fish aren't gonna. They're for the most part they're not gonna eat the small fish. They're gonna
yeah,
go after like the bigger fish because it's easier for them.
and that's actually a good segue because that's how he kind of views the microbiome. It's like a ecosystem.
Uh huh.
If you view it from an ecological perspective, and you're
Yeah.
cultivating this kind of community of a bunch of different species, and they all have different role and stuff like that. So if you eat certain things, you might get too much of one thing that might overpower the ecosystem. Um, and one thing that's what I had a question about was like, a lot of research I've read is usually is diverse, like diversity equals healthy. Like
Hmm.
the more different species, that the healthier it is. But I asked him like, is that true? He's like, it's not true. Usually diversity means stability, so you have a more stable ecosystem, but it might be less productive. Um, so if you think of, I don't know, what's a good example?
like companies when they get too big, they
Yeah,
diversify a lot.
exactly. Like you have a lot of different talents there, but they might not
Yeah.
be able to
Hmm.
work together as well.
Right. It's a
Yeah,
lot more stable because they all have their own roles, but it doesn't mean they're gonna be the more productive because there's a lot of fucking things people need to do.
yeah, they're like distracting each other and shit. Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I thought that was interesting. So, for certain people who are dealing with certain diseases or um, just certain health outcomes, you might want to tailor their diet to increase one microbiota more than usual, right? And have like an imbalance possibly just to make a that product that could help them out. So, um, yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
Did you
It's
happen to ask
interesting.
him if like Taco Bell was the equivalent of like a biome nuke for your stomach?
I did not ask him that, but he is one thing I picked up on and is very true is he's very passionate about fiber. Like the Western diet is very low in fiber, and that's like the number one thing you need to keep your microbiome healthy.
Hmm.
Um, you might think it's like yogurt or like kombucha, things that have bacteria in them, but it's actually fiber. Um,
Did
and
you
there's a
ask
big
him?
difference between types of fiber.
Did you ask him about Metamucil?
I did not ask him
Dude,
Did
about
you
dude, because
ask him
honestly,
how many times a day he
dude,
shits? Because it sounds like he has a lot of fiber.
dude, dude, honestly though, I've like for like the past week now, I've been taking Metamucil. Dude, it is, it is like life changing.
Like good or bad?
Good,
I don't
good.
know what that
Like,
is.
it's just a fiber supplement.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. For
Yeah,
some reason, when you said Metamucil, I was thinking Mucinex. I don't know
yeah,
why.
yeah.
It's like it's helping you. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, dude. So Metamucil, yeah, it's just a fiber supplement. There's insoluble and soluble fiber in it.
Yep.
So the first time that I ever heard it was on like I think the H3 podcast,
Hmm.
which him and his wife are YouTubers before. They're still kind of YouTubers, but now they have
Not
a
really,
podcast.
but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
barely.
Yeah.
but yeah, so he was like raving about the like taking Metamucil and how like it like changed his life because like he only had to like wipe like once after taking a shit. So I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose here. I might as well try it. So I picked up like a jar of it at
Yeah.
the drugstore and I got it for like $8 or something like that, like dirt ass cheap. I've been taking it. It literally so what
we're gonna learn a lot
I
about your shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
excited. I'm excited.
so I didn't know what the difference between a tablespoon and a teaspoon was.
Oh no, dude.
So the first night that I got it, I think this is like last Friday, and I was
Because you
just
like
like,
stir it into water, right?
yeah, you started in the water.
Yeah,
No, it was
Yeah, okay.
Thursday. So Thursday, I was just like, oh, okay. I think like a or a teaspoon is about this. And in hindsight, it was actually a tablespoon is what I grabbed. Um, and I just nice rounded scoop of this Metamucil, dumped it into my
Like,
into like my blender bottle, drank it
Keeping
down, and
tablespoon.
I'm just like, all right, this doesn't taste bad. And then like within like an hour or two, my stomach just starts like rumbling, and I'm just like, oh boy, like I don't know about this, and dude. I shit you not. No pun intended.
No, I think
I mean, I think you did shit, yeah.
Dude, I didn't need to wipe it all from it. Seriously, dude, it just came right out. It didn't smell bad. It didn't stink. It was literally the best I've ever had. Except also, it was just like flying out of my ass. Like I thought, like I thought that I had like a freaking 6-inch diameter tube through my anus, and it was just dropping out. But yeah, anyway, I got it figured out, and I was taking like 4 times the recommended daily intake of fiber from it. hence it was just like basically falling out of my ass.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it's been great recently.
Yeah. So okay, when you say it's been great, are you talking about just about the shitting part of it, or you also felt like healthier overall?
I mean, I don't feel gaseous at all. I feel like I haven't gotten like bloated. Poops are a lot more regular.
Mm-hmm.
Even though like
I mean,
so I already ate
when if
like
you're at work, I mean, I guess it's kind of nice. Like, oh, I guess I gotta
yeah.
go to the bathroom.
Sure. But like I don't know.
That's
It's
the only
like I
reason
feel
he's
like
doing it.
I feel like
Gotta shit at someone else's time.
I get enough, or I get like plenty of fiber as it is because I eat like a lot of veggies, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like next level.
Okay. I might have to hop on that train.
Yeah, try it
I
out.
mean, you're kind of convincing me. Well, I'm not gonna
If you
lie.
if you guys are gonna try it, so there's Metamucil, which is the name brand, and then if you go to like I think it's Walgreens, then you can get like Walmucil. It's like
The generic version.
yeah, the generic version, and it's like the Metamucil for like the same size jar is like $20. The Walmucil is like $8. Like it's a no-brainer. It's like it's fucking fiber. Like come on,
It's
probably
it's like the butter where it's like butter. I believe it's not. Or
yeah,
like
yeah,
all
just-
the
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's just as good as well. I guess I can't say it's just as good as the original, having not tried the name brand. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
compare. Do a
it's-
week of like the nice stuff, a week of the Walgreens one, and then compare your shits and report back next week.
It's not gonna be that different, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't
That's probably
think-
the
I don't
same
think so
exact thing.
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
But it's real shit.
Literally.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
That's
But
awesome.
sorry,
I mean, yeah, I
sorry
mean,
to derail that entire thing.
no, that's
talking about my
actually
shit.
that's a great tangent because yeah, I mean, fiber is super important for, and yeah, it most manifests itself probably like in how easy it is to shit, but like
Mhm.
it has so much good health effects for keeping that community healthy.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And did you
I guess-
see? Did you
Go ahead.
see? I think I saw this on Reddit the other day. How like there's like some speculation that your appendix might like host like good bacteria or something like that for when like
Hmm.
basically like your like a gut nuke goes off in your stomach and like kills off your like
Well, you're
biome of-
fucked then, Dayton.
Yeah,
You
so
don't
like
have that.
I
You
mean
have a
it's
nuke.
speculation, but like yeah, I
your
don't
appendix
have,
is like a backup
yeah
supply.
yeah
Interesting. I have not heard that, but
My
that's really
understanding was
interesting.
that, or I mean, I guess what I was taught in school is like your appendix was like when, like it was useful like forever ago, and it kind of just
Yeah.
became vestigial, and that's
Yep.
why it
Uh-huh.
just kept shrinking.
Yep. But yeah, that's
I mean,
interesting though,
it's
Dayton.
an
I haven't.
interesting
I'll have to
theory.
look into that.
yeah. I mean, I think as far as I know, it's just speculation, but I don't know if there's been any like study on it or anything.
I don't know.
But-
Let's look into it. Because yeah, antibiotics do nuke your system.
Which I am taking right now.
You gotta eat that. Well, you can't eat yogurt, can you? Yeah. What's another thing you could eat? Kimchi, maybe.
Probiotics.
Probiotics, yeah. I'm trying to give like actual like food that it has good bacteria in it. That's
Yeah, I
good.
don't know. I'll get on the probiotic train or something like that after I
Yeah.
finish my antibiotics up. But
And then I guess the other quick thing I'll talk about is I was talking to a different professor who is doing sensory research, so specifically like taste, and how people react to taste. And it was funny. So you run into some in nutrition research, you run into some psychology issues. So they were testing polyphenols, which are in like wine and dark chocolate, but they're really high in tea. And they were the polyphenol itself is what makes those things bitter. So people are trying to possibly like get rid of it, but when they get rid of it, they get rid of that polyphenols are actually really healthy for you, right? So they were trying to determine like how bitter it was making the thing. So they made this, you know, quote unquote tea, which is just like hot water and just pure polyphenols in it. So it's just really shitty tea, essentially. That's what those are her words. Like she's like, yeah, it's just really bad tea. But they recruited a bunch of people who drink a lot of tea to do the test because they hypothesized that there's a protein that's in your saliva that will like while you are drinking tea, it will bind to the polyphenols and reduce the bitter taste. So they'd assume that people who drink tea a lot would have more of that protein in their saliva, right? So they do the test and they all rated it as really bitter. But the problem is that they did that because people associate the word bitter with bad. So if they think it's bad, they'll just say it's bitter. It's not necessarily true because most people aren't really trained in tasting the different, tastes.
Right, like the language.
Yeah, like the salty, sweet, bitter, all that stuff. So they have to they're gonna have to redo it in a different kind of way, so it's a little bit more accurate. But
I wonder if
that's
they just
like the
put
psychology side.
I wonder if they just put like peppermint extract or something in there to like.
Yeah, I forgot. I was thinking that too. I forgot to ask if they could flavor it in any way. I don't know if that would affect what their.
Yeah, I
That
guess
might
I
be
don't.
missing the controls. I don't know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting that because I was asking about just saliva in general, and there's a lot of proteins there that change the taste of things. And it'll kind of change based on what you're eating or drinking throughout even the course of a day, and sleep affects it and stuff like that. So, yeah, interesting stuff. And she's also working on a project where she wants trying to get kids to like veggies more. So what they're gonna try to do is just make some gummy bears that taste like veggies, so that kids associate the sweetness with the bitterness of veggies to try to make that connection in their brain. Because fruit's pretty easy because fruit's actually sweet,
It's got
but
sugar
veggies
in it.
are pretty bitter. So it's making the gummy bears so the kids kind of associate those things. Which she's like, I don't know if it'll work, but it'll be fun to make that stuff. So
Interesting.
Huh.
I guess when I drink, I mean, back to your bitterness comment. When I drink beer, a lot of the times I don't really have a lot of words to describe it. So if something's super hoppy, like a hop slam or a Two Hearted, yeah, it's bitter, but I don't know if I associate it with it being bad.
I mean, I have that issue also with beer.
But I couldn't tell you a lot of other words I would use to describe it. I know when there's hops in a beer, and that's basically about it.
I usually just kind of do one of two different grunts. Got a good grunt and a bad grunt.
Just caveman style.
Or those are the two. I'll leave it up to you guys to guess.
I guess the last thing quick that I'll say with senses is we went to one of the labs, and my host Steph, she works in one of the sensory labs, and she gave me there's this test you can do to see if you're a super taster or a super sniffer. Found out I am both a super taster and a super sniffer.
Wow.
I know, but which is kind of wasted on me though, because I was like Gabe, with beer, I'm like, it's good. I taste hops, but I can't taste. I don't know. I'm not good at differentiating taste. I have to practice that somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that's a craft that you kind of learn throughout time.
Yeah, because it was funny because I took my dad out. Went to my parents there a week, and I had him try some beers he's never tried before, and he's tasted one of the IPAs, oh, is it grapefruit? And I'm like, probably. I mean, I've never had grapefruit, so I don't know, but I know that grapefruit is in a lot of New England IPAs as a flavor.
Yeah.
See, it's interesting that because I know that one of the things that super tasters really dislike is grapefruit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, did you taste that IPA that your dad said was grapefruit?
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite New England IPA I've ever had, but it was pretty good.
Okay, because that's.
But I should try grapefruit though.
Yeah,
just buy a grapefruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're easy to eat. You just cut them in half and take a spoon.
Actually, yeah.
Because I know I hate grapefruit. So and I know my sister is a super taster because she did one of those tests, and I have speculations that I might be a super taster as well, but I haven't taken a test, so I can't say anything.
Basically so it's a little strip, and you put it on your tongue, and if you taste nothing, then you're not, and if it tastes really bitter, then you are, and it is stupid bitter. It is so bitter. It was lingering on my tongue for so long. I'm like, God damn it! I wish I wasn't a super taster.
Wait, how does the super sniffer one work? Is it farts in mason jars
or something? It's a little
vial.
It's a little vial, and you just smell it, and then depending on what you smell, it's a different level. So it's 3 different levels. If it's harsh, that's the most super smelling, and then it's if it's kind of like a ocean kind of smell, it's medium, and if you don't smell anything, then you're not. And I had the harsh one.
Maybe
it's kind of funny if you get that. It's just they're unpleasant experiences for the test.
Yeah.
Yep. But I mean, how else do you test that? I mean, I don't think you really can.
It's a genetic thing.
The ocean.
It's a genetic thing, kind of like the cilantro kind of deal.
See,
Oh yeah.
dude, I've had this question forever. Like, I don't know if I like cilantro because I've just become accustomed to what it tastes like. Like,
Yeah.
like what is cilantro supposed to taste like?
Well, it depends on if you have the gene or not. If you have one
Yeah.
gene, it tastes like soap, and if you don't have the gene, it tastes
Right.
kind of like, well, okay. I asked her about cilantro. She's like, yeah, people would say it tastes like soap or like bugs. I'm like, I wouldn't say bugs. I would say it tastes like
No.
fresh, like nature.
Yeah.
But it's hard to like, Max, you know what I'm saying?
See,
Like, it's
but
not,
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
it's
is
not like buggy, but it's like very nature. It's a very fresh nature
that's
kind
what
of
it tastes like
vibe.
to non cilantro haters.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
It
tastes
still
like
doesn't sound that
bugs.
good.
Yeah, I would say nature more than bugs.
Yeah, nature more than bugs.
See,
Definitely.
I can't say
Okay.
that I've had soap in a while though.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm kind of in the same boat with Dane, where like I've tried it. Like I've gotten like pork tacos like forever ago at the house, and the
Mhm.
recipe had cilantro, and I never had it before, so I bought it.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, I ate it. It wasn't like my favorite thing, but it's like I'd much rather have lettuce type of a deal.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
And
it's strong either way. It's not like it's like
yeah, and I
calm.
couldn't
It's
tell
like
if it
sharp.
was like I couldn't tell if it was like soap or if it was like what it was supposed to taste like. Because I remember someone telling me like, "Oh, you
yeah.
might hate it," and I was like, "It just tastes like a leaf in my mouth." I don't know,
We
like.
should do like a special episode of the podcast, like the shorter episodes, like me eating grapefruit and you guys were having cilantro. We're like,
Yeah.
Like I just don't understand it. Like maybe we honestly should. We should get some super taster like tabs and super sniffer vials and
I don't know how easy those are to get, but we could
Yeah,
try.
how
Yeah.
dude, come on,
accessible it
come on. They
is.
gotta be on Amazon. At least the
Yeah,
super
they gotta be on
taster ones
Amazon,
have
yeah.
to be on it. Dude, they probably make scratch and sniff super sniffer tabs.
There's probably something you can. There's probably something you could do at home too. There's probably some like home methods.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's
Tasting
feasible.
is weird, man.
I think it's feasible.
Maxi Max, give us your topic.
My topic is computers, and more particularly computer processors, because I feel like that is my thing to bring to
Your
the table that
wheelhouse.
probably has never been talked about before.
Yeah, so just for background, Max has got a degree in computer engineering from Tech.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and when I was young, I was always like, I don't get this. Like, how does a computer work? You ask
Yep.
yourself that question, and it eventually all makes sense, I'd say. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start with some different topics and try to bring them together, because you need to know some stuff to know the other thing,
I'm glad you're talking about this because that's the processor's like a black box to me. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah,
what the hell
well, there
goes
really
on in
is.
there.
That's
Max,
what it is.
did
in a
you
way.
learn with the little man computer technique?
No, what is that?
Okay. So,
Are you
I
stealing
mean,
his
this really
thunder?
quick. No.
Okay.
I took one class on like in my degree, just on like what computers are, but it was a very base level, and they did this thing called the little man computer, which is like this thing for kids on like how
Uh-huh.
a program works or like how
Yeah.
the CPU works. So it'd be like the little man goes to the mailbox and grabs the address from RAM. It was just
Mm-hmm.
super super goofy,
Oh,
but it was like it was
Yeah.
meant for like elementary like level stuff.
Right.
So I didn't know if that was
That is a good analogy. Like,
It's like how the cell's a manufacturing plant analogy. Yeah.
right. I mean, it's helpful,
The
especially like
mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
it's helpful for low level stuff for sure. I just didn't know you had started
No.
there.
No, not quite, but we'll get there. So the first thing I wanted to cover was assembly language and machine code, and the difference
Yeah.
between them, because really they're the same thing. And the classic question is like, ask somebody what the difference is.
I can
And
tell you.
yeah, so assembly language is like the lowest level of programming that a person can actually read and
Okay, so
use.
it's not binary yet?
No,
Okay.
no, that's what machine code is.
Okay, gotcha.
So assembly language will be something so simple. It'll be like, take these two numbers and add them, or compare them and give back a number based on what like the comparison is.
Hmm.
Something like that.
So
So
like if this equals this, then return true.
right, which would just be a
False.
1 or a 0, or
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
something else if it's like neither, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But simply put, you can take assembly language and just convert it in a systematic way. Like there's a chart, to say a addition operation would convert to like 0010 in this set of the instruction. And then
Okay.
like I have to get to this next topic to start talking more, is there's something called a register, which is just something that holds a value. So on a 32-bit computer, it'll hold 32 bits of information. So normally that's like a number. So you'd have like add these two registers, right? So you add them both together, whatever, but also those registers could also convert themselves into a binary format. So then you get this long binary instruction, which is what an assembly language like instruction is. Assembly language will have like one-liners, like I said, just like add these two numbers. So you can convert that directly into machine code, which is all binary.
So which one is like lower? Machine code's the lowest.
Yeah,
and like
machine
simplicity?
code.
Humans can't read machine code.
Yeah, you
correct?
Yeah,
can't
humans can't-
read it, but you could like take a machine code and then convert it in the same way in reverse and turn it into assembly language.
And then you can read assembly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense, but it's
So-
like I said, also really simple stuff.
So sorry, quick interjection. So most computers are 64-bit, right?
Yeah, well nowadays they're.
Yeah.
Obviously
Okay.
it used to be, but
Yeah.
You can still set 32-bit registry values though.
yeah,
You
and a
can
lot
set
of
whatever you want.
things you don't need the full 64
don't
bits
need-
to properly do the instructions. So.
Windows has a lot of them that are literally just ones or zeros. So like, if it's a 1, it'll like be the setting for like, I don't know. Let's say you have your screensaver as like the default. It's either like a 1 or a 0, so it just
Yeah.
checks that value, and you can
Right.
manually turn it off. It's not like you need 64 bits for the whole picture or whatever. You
Right,
just-
yeah. Well, yeah, there'll be like these, and yeah, getting what you're saying, Gabe, like they'll have registers that are just sort of ones that you won't use in those regular operations that if you set them, they will change like a setting on your operating system per se, like
Gotcha.
whatever you're working on. But so that way, yeah, you can compress it more and just have 32 bits for a whole bunch of settings or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
So we're at assembly. Then what's next?
so now I'm going to talk about
Do you have
pipelining.
notes? It looks like you have notes.
I do have some notes because I want to make sure I cover things. If I skip something, I'm going to be talking about something that doesn't make any sense. And I'm
I
gonna
like
do
it.
way too
I
much
like the
backtracking.
preparation.
Yeah.
Dude, I did not prepare
That's
as
what I
much
was
as
typing
you did.
earlier. That's what I was typing earlier because I was like, I don't want to not make any sense here.
See, Max is already better than Joseph. All right. That's all.
I mean, we didn't really come that prepared.
So I'm going to talk about pipelining.
Mhm.
So those that set of bits and instruction just goes into the processor, and then the processor does a bunch of things with those numbers. So I guess I'll talk about this other topic first. There's two types of instruction sets. So there's RISC and CISC. RISC is like a reduced instruction set, and CISC is complex instruction set. And I think the name's a little bit misleading, but in CISC there's just more instructions, but the whole idea behind it is RISC will complete an entire instruction in a single computer cycle, which would be your CPU's refresh rate, so like 4 gigahertz or something.
Okay.
But normally a RISC processor, like that's really efficient to finish one instruction per cycle. That's like the RISC goal.
Mhm.
But normally a RISC processor is going to work way slower. It's going to be like 1-2 gigahertz. Whereas CISC processor won't necessarily get one instruction per cycle, but it's going to have those really high speeds.
Gotcha.
And that's
4.5,
where,
So it'll
5.
net be faster. Like if you added up the.
yeah,
timing
exactly. They're
cycle.
normally pretty similar, but it always depends on what you're like, what operations you're running.
Yeah. So it's more cycles, but the cycles are less time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm going to explain with pipelining
Well, I was
why
gonna say, that's why there's
possible.
pipelining, right?
Right. So pipelining is more important in a CISC architecture where these instructions are more complex. So the classic analogy that I learned first in class was doing laundry. So if you were doing your laundry, if you had like, let's say 3 loads,
Mhm.
you'd put the first one in, right? And then you'd wash, and then the second one you put in the dryer, and then you'd put the next one in the wash, right? Well, the other one's drying.
Yep.
And then when that one's done, you'd fold it and then put them all through the pipeline, right? Instead of just putting it in the wash, putting it in the dryer, folding it, and then putting the next one in, because that's way slower, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So there's that concept where you're pipelining all the instructions. So a processor will have the same thing going on, where first it'll like load all the like registers, and it'll get all those values out from the registers because it knows which ones it needs to access. And then another one will like run operations on it, like add the numbers, or sometimes there's other operations. I want to get to only one other one, and some of them are over my head. Like I know a lot of modern processors have like a 14, 16 step pipeline, which is just like, I don't know what's going on.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Like we learned probably about like a 7 or 8 one was the most complex one we ever really talked about. And a lot of them are like sub steps to a certain thing, goofy stuff like that. And the other instruction I wanted to talk about was like a jump instruction. So obviously everything's done in a certain order.
Mhm.
But let's say a program, like a lot of people know in basic programming, you have like a loop. So you go through a certain set and then you repeat and repeat. But at some point you exit, right?
Yep. There's a
So
condition to exit.
yeah, exactly. But the computer doesn't know when you're going to exit. So it's going to just keep running through, and it'll do a jump to like repeat the loop. So it'll check this condition and then jump back to a previous point in the program and just do everything again and again, right? And in the case of a CISC computer, CISC architecture, what they'll do to optimize it is they'll have it like look ahead at next instructions, and it does that to not like it does that so it can save cycles when executing, because a lot of times it'll have to just wipe the pipeline because it'll jump to a different point that it's not expecting.
Mhm.
And then it all these operations that were in the pipeline already may not even need to be executed, because if you
Oh.
look ahead and say, well, I'm actually going to jump up here, I might jump. This is like really confusing, I know.
So it's like let's say you have like 5 loads of laundry, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, but at like
I
after
have
the
too many
third,
fucking clothes first.
yeah, okay. after 3 loads, then I'm gonna stop or something like that. So like you're loading your laundry in, and then by the time your third one finishes, when you're folding your third one, you're gonna have your fourth one in the dryer and the fifth one in the laundry machine, right?
Right.
So then you would have to clear those out
Yeah.
when you get done at the third one.
Yeah, I guess the confusing part is explaining why you'd have to clear them out. But it's
Well, it's because
because
you exit the loop, right?
yeah, it's because you're looking ahead and noticing that you're going to be exiting this loops, but maybe you even put these instructions in or these operations in previous to get them like done first, because you want to do in that certain operation, because a lot of times the assembly tool, you only need to check if the what's being compared to exit the loop actually has an operation to change it beforehand.
Okay,
If
let
that
me
makes
let me
sense.
throw in an analogy, see if this is if I understand this right. So back to the laundry. We're doing 5 loads, right?
Okay.
I'm currently folding the third one, and I got one in the washer, one in the dryer, right? Having a great time. Joseph busts in. He's like, "Hey, I need the machines right now. Exit the loop." And I'm like, "All right, I guess." So I gotta pull everything out, and they're wet and dry, but we don't need them anymore because Joseph has to hop in.
Yeah, no, I
Is
think
that kind of
that's a better analogy. Yeah,
Okay.
okay?
like something
That's
comes up and just says, "We don't need any of this anymore. We gotta start doing this stuff." Yeah.
You
yeah.
hit X on something.
Fucking
and just,
Joseph. Even when he's gone, he's messing shit up.
I can't wait to listen to this podcast on Monday and be like, "God damn, they're gonna keep up with me the whole time."
Let's name this episode like "Fuck Joseph."
Fuck
Like,
Joseph.
Fuck Joseph. So Monday morning he gets into work. He's like, "Oh, time to listen to what they talked about."
So that's
Um,
the jump instruction, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Trying to think of where I want to go next. I know one thing I wanted to talk about too is like how you get. So I talked about how in the first set you like grab the registers.
hmm
Well, the register space that you're searching from is the like local cache, which I know Gabe knows about. So you have like different levels of cache on your computer. So it's always taking from that first lowest level to swap out these register values.
Because
So
faster,
that's how you.
right?
Yeah, it's really fast. Like it comes down to how close it is to the processor, because the speed of light comes into play in this shit. It's so stupid fast, right? So there's a little bit of memory that's so close to the registers that we can swap them out really quickly, and then you have like different levels. So then they'll swap these different levels out in like blocks to get the memory that it needs to run these operations too. And that's so it's like it's like L1 cache, L2, and L3, and then you'll have like your RAM and then your hard drive. That's normally like the order.
So
Huh.
I have a question. What are the different cores doing? Does like each core have one
Yeah.
register?
It's kind of like its own separate processor, so it can run
Okay.
those instructions itself normally.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then
So
Well,
it's
you can
faster because it has more centers where it can process stuff.
yeah, but that makes things really complicated, because normally when you have more cores, you get less utilization, because these different processors need to know what each one's doing and what's coming out of them, and if they
Yeah.
need to run a program at the same time. So it will often obviously help, but you won't always get the best utilization from them all.
Yeah.
unless there's like separate programs using a different core or something.
I mean, from my understanding, like they hit a point at one point where they're like they had single core CPUs, obviously, and they're like, wait, we can't make this any smaller or faster. So
Yeah, because
I'm just gonna make two, right? And
yeah,
obviously, it's gotten away from us now. There's like 64 core processors for like
Yeah.
the servers and shit. But
yeah, that too. Yeah, because they're under the problem where if they make it any smaller, it's just gonna get too hot and it's gonna melt everything. So they can't do that.
so Max, I know you're still.
Well, that becomes a material engineering problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it becomes not my problem anymore, and maybe not even a solvable one. And they're just like, yeah, okay.
Refresh my memory. In that same class I took, they were telling us that there was a point because clock speeds are pretty topped out at this point. Like you're not really getting faster, but the instructions per clock are getting better. Like the process to like have more shit get done per clock or per cycle. But I remember them telling me that like because of if the gigahertz goes up, its distance that it can travel is less or something. So like because let's say it's like 4 gigahertz, it has the speed of light, right? So it can only travel that like for that like short period of time.
Yeah.
So the faster your clock speed, the less time it has to travel, and that like started to become an issue. Like the speed of light wasn't fast enough.
Right, that's what I was talking about. That's why you get this problem with, and that's part of the pipeline too. That's how they make the cycle shorter, is because it has to go through this pipeline and do all these different things. It can't do that in that short amount of time. The light can't travel like across the board.
I just find that so fascinating. It's like we literally are going faster than like the speed of light is having an issue on distance. I just find it so crazy.
And so when we're talking about the speed of light, we're talking about electrons, right?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Like electrons are what are moving inside of the processor because it's a semiconductor.
It's not like an actual light, you know. It's not like optical.
No,
right?
It's not an optical light. No.
Yeah. So I mean, we're talking distance. What scale are we talking? Like nanometers? Are we down nanometers yet? Or
I think it's pretty. I think it's around there. I mean, I don't know for sure, but
think about how big your little processor is. You know.
Yeah.
Your computer, it's not very big, and
they need you to roast me like that, Max, but okay.
Listen, you dumbass.
Look how fucking small your processor is, alright?
Max came on this show just to destroy the host.
Okay.
Take over Joseph's spot.
Speaking of the processor itself, what are the pins doing? So for those who don't know, when you put a processor in a computer, it's like how many pins on the bottom?
Well, some don't have pins anymore.
Yeah,
like a lot
Intel don't have pins.
But it's just how it interfaces with the motherboard, right?
Yeah. To me, I don't really know. I mean, it's obviously just probably how it gets instructions and things too from other parts of the computer and accesses RAM and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Other than I don't know what each individual pin's doing. That's beyond me. And it obviously depends on the processor.
Yeah.
My guess would be it's just a way for it to communicate.
Yeah.
Right.
Like plugging it into the wall, like it has a source, right?
So we're talking about like how computers work, right? That's kind of the impetus for this topic. So like when you like open a web page, right? You know, isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like you're sending instructions, but it's like at a higher level of code, and then it keeps getting like simpler and simpler and simpler.
There's 7 layers.
Down to, like,
the OSI layer, baby.
Yeah, and then you get down to assembly and then machine code, and then it executes.
Yeah, it executes.
How you're talking, how you were just describing is like how it executes, but like you have those layers of code that are increasingly more complex that humans can do things more efficiently.
There's so much shit just like loading a web page that it's like kind of hard to break that down.
Sorry, that was maybe a bad example, but
yeah, because there's like anything from the HTML code, right, to like also the networking that's required to go to that page.
Okay,
like
well then let's make it simpler and say opening up a local file on your hard drive.
Yeah, that would be.
Or even like just using the calculator app on your computer, maybe.
Yeah, to me too. You have like a program is normally compiled into a binary file, and that when it's compiled is where it normally gets converted to that essentially assembly code. That's where that process is. So
so in your computer science class, you press compile.
That's what it's doing there.
So it's an executable. It's already So it's an executable file. It's already been kind of like packaged as in binary.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff I'm sure is like OS overhead that it has to interpret what the OS wants to make it actually work correctly.
But I think you're like correct in saying like there's obviously a lot of code that's like strictly just for the person to use it.
Right.
Like, the GUI and all that stuff is its own high level stuff.
The graphics user interface for those.
And then it just kind of goes down from there, right?
Right. Yeah. for sure.
You know, like computers are really interesting to me. It's always fascinating to me. Like, how did obviously we had to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and it didn't used to be like you're like literally like turning dials on like this massive like server room like
Yeah.
we didn't have interfaces or
They
anything
had
like
vacuum tubes is what they used.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Just so crazy how we got from there. We were able to get over the hump where we could use an interface and then slowly build up this complexity where now we could do what we can do in computers.
Mm-hmm.
But
There's a quote somewhere from I don't know who the guy is, but he said something along the lines of, "There'll never be a need for more than like 10 computers in the world or something." Like, he didn't see the practical use, and like
Yeah.
we probably have 10 devices of our own. Like,
yeah.
Right.
Well, now we're running the issue of we're running out of storage space because there's so much content being generated every single minute.
Yeah.
And like there's just running out of room for
there's not really a
servers.
lot of good ways to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You just need to cull YouTube of all this shit.
Honestly.
Just deletes all this shit.
I actually thought about it the other day. It's like, will there be a point where YouTube's gonna be like, all right, if the video is like this old, it's just gonna be gone because we don't have the server space for it anymore.
I would guess if YouTube were gonna implement something like that, it would be a combination between like you need to like verify that you actually want your video on here still, because I'm sure that there are like
Yeah.
millions of accounts on YouTube that have like maybe like a gig or two of videos uploaded that have like
A bunch of like
0
high school
views.
projects.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that people like don't give a shit about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And relatively, like the older videos are probably way smaller in terms of actual file sizes. The new videos that are
Yeah.
just
The resolution. You can have
easily
4K
10,
videos
20
now.
times
They
as
have
large as
8K.
those.
You can upload to YouTube in 8K right now.
Oh,
Or,
can
yeah,
you?
Yeah.
I didn't
that's
know
just so much more comparatively.
that. Yeah.
This is a
that's
whole other
crazy.
thing too, but like I do not understand it yet, but there's this whole thing like making your video in a streamable file format. There's like different codecs and stuff. I really
Yeah.
don't know, but like
That
it'll make
shit
it easier
gets
to
weird.
stream. It gets really fucking confusing real fast. I'm not even gonna
Yeah.
like go
It
there,
does
but
get weird.
No, yeah, that stuff's fucked up.
Isn't it just how it like compresses the video?
I don't
Yeah.
even.
I
Well,
think
I
it has
don't even
something
wanna
to
go
do
there,
with
dude.
how it like reads the video and how it's.
Yeah. Well, and it can get weird too,
It has
like
to do with the
with
ability to
streaming,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like even if you're like finding a local file, it has to like convert it into like I don't know. I don't know enough about it to talk about it, but like
Yeah, let's just move
Just-
on.
Okay, yeah, I don't need to talk about this.
All right, am I going to Dayton or Gabe next? That's the question.
Oh, did you finish, Max? Or did you
Oh,
have
yeah.
anything else?
Yeah, that's about enough. I don't think I need to go any further. If I think of anything, I will. But
Well, I have a good segue, so I'll use it and I'll be brief. So Dayton can get to his topic. So you're talking about how like computers kind of started off obviously in like warehouses. And I listened to this podcast called 9 Days in July, and it's like this story of Apollo 11 and like a whole bunch of different aspects of it, like between like what was going on during that time, because obviously in the late 60s, and like also like the technology that went behind it. And I learned from that podcast that NASA was one of the first people to actually use microchips, just due to the sheer amount of space, and it obviously accelerated the technology decades ahead of its time.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of stuff works, though. It's like you have something that's it's not usable by the masses, and then like a government will pick it up, refine it using taxpayer dollars, and then it'll get injected back into consumer electronics.
Yep. Yeah, and I think what made that podcast so interesting is, I mean, obviously, like we're all taught, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and whatever, blah blah blah. But hence the name, it goes like day by day. So if there's like something that's like not going on, like if they're just like flying back, they'll kind of like go to different points in time. So like they were talking about how when we were growing up, obviously we didn't go to we're just starting to go back to the moon. Like we just announced like some new missions. But like people were constantly saying like, well, why aren't we doing that? But like back then they didn't even want to do it because I mean they had so much shit going on, because I think Vietnam was going on during that.
It was the Cold War.
They had the Cold War. Like there was just it cost them so much fucking money to do it. And I think the part that the biggest takeaway I had from it is like when I read it in a book, I remember as a kid being like, that's pretty cool, but didn't think too much of it. It's like, yeah, you just went to the moon. But then like when you really think about it, like the amount of technology and like math and all that shit that they had to do is
a lot of it
just
by hand too. I mean, you gotta watch the
mind-blowing.
movie, dude. You gotta watch Apollo 11 the movie because it is fucking insane. They're using like calculators, like trying to calculate shit they're doing like on there, and NASA's trying to figure out how to get them back. They had like slingshot around the moon, I think, and all this shit. Like it's
Well, they used
nuts.
the gravity of the moon as a slingshot.
Yeah. So
But like
yeah,
if they
it's
fucked up, they
insane.
could like fly off in like nowhere, right?
Yep.
Like when
Yeah.
they were leaving Earth specifically, like to go to the moon.
Yeah.
They used Earth's gravity as an assist.
Mhm.
But just like the amount of math that they had to do with like so little computing resources,
Yeah.
and how I don't know how like I wouldn't say unsafe because obviously they spent a ton of years. They did a ton of missions before it to train for it. But like how many small things could go wrong? Like when they were on the moon, they they were taking off their suits, right? And they bumped a circuit breaker and broke it. And it just happened to be the button that they needed to go back. Like it was the one that had the burn to like send them up. Like
Oh,
you can't account for that.
Yeah.
And he had a pen in his pocket that he forgot to take out that fit perfectly in the notch for the switch. So he put in the pen and then turned on the knob.
God damn.
Just like thinking about, I don't know, like it's just so fascinating how delicate it was. Really delicate, like the whole planning and all the time and the money that they spent just to like say fuck you to the Russians. It's just
Honestly.
It
Dude, that's
shows
like-
like how smart and creative humans can be, but also how spiteful. You know, it's like the both sides of the coin.
Right.
That's like if I were in charge of NASA, that's the level of petty shit that would get done.
Well-
It's like, oh, you don't think I can do this? Well, fuck you.
Yeah, it's literally a whole government being petty. But anyways, overall it was really interesting. But on like the engineering side of it, I find it really fascinating. Just to see how they use like weird tricks. Like you can't like unscrew a bolt in space, so they just fucking blew it up. Like it just like would explode. Or like how they use different stages, because obviously it's a big fucking rocket to leave Earth, and then it broke apart in like 4 different stages. Like they had, so there's a third guy in the mission, and his whole job was literally just orbit the moon, and then he had like, so there's like, I'm doing this in video, but there was like one piece, and they had to like turn one part, like the command module, 180 degrees around like twice just to make sure it wasn't broken in space. Right, turn it around, and if they fuck up, like they just like kind of fly away. And then redock it, obviously, like the math behind that to get it to go back up. And they had to leave the lunar module behind because it's just extra weight they don't need. And it just
Hashtag ultralight.
It's just crazy how like, I mean, because in space obviously there's not, when you separate something, it's like a push, and they would use that as like, you know, ways to like push themselves gently, and they had to like calculate that too. Like if they're pushing like even a minuscule amount, like I think they were off on their computers because one little bolt or something fucked up, and it like ejected, and it like put enough force on it to like have to recalibrate it. It was just that minute, that specific.
Yeah, it's amazing how those guys survived with the little technology we had back then relative to what we have now.
Well, and they did it so many times too. Like,
Yeah.
what, 6 times? So.
Yeah. I guess before you go, Dayton, a quick thing going off the Cold War, a couple things. If you're interested in that stuff, like I know I have no idea if it's a good show or not, but Apple TV has a show called For All Mankind. That's a alternate history that what if the Russians won the Cold War, like they beat us to the moon, and then the Americans get super like spiteful and just like puts like all their money into like just beating the Russians at everything, like space stuff. So I don't know. It's an interesting premise. I don't know if it's actually good or not. And then I've been into Watchmen recently because the show just came out on HBO, and the book Watchmen has a really good take on the Cold War with Russia. So that's interesting stuff. But
it's funny, they tried to like, the Russians tried to beat the Americans, and they actually tried to send a lunar module to like grab the rocks and then fly back like a month before.
Oh
and
yeah,
they were rushing it so much it like killed a guy. Like
Jesus.
He said that he was doing a test flight, and before he took off, his boss said that thing's a piece of shit. And he couldn't. He said he didn't want to like say no because then he knew his best friend was gonna take on the flight, and he didn't want him to die because he had kids or something. And obviously, it's your friend. So he flies Obviously, it doesn't work out because it's a fucking piece of shit. And then he goes to deploy the chutes. They don't fucking work. Just fucking smacks it in the fucking ground.
Oh God, dude.
Yeah,
It's
that,
So like on
horrible.
the same token of like, yeah, when people come together, like you can do all these crazy things. But when you're being so spiteful, you're rushing things. Like,
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good motive for science. I don't
Yeah.
Nope.
think.
Nope.
All right, Dayton, what do you got for us?
So I wanted to have more of just like a discussion on STEM education and
Ooh.
kind of on both what we think the best way to educate STEM is, and then also STEM education relating to the shortage of trade jobs. So
Mm.
I guess let's start with the first one. Like, obviously, we all went through, you know, preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, and then eventually 4 years of undergraduate STEM education.
4.5 for me, dude. Not to
Okay, you're
brag.
so much
That's-
smarter than us.
Yeah, I was just so smart. I stayed around another semester.
but but anyway, like what do you guys think the good things are about the way that we're currently teaching STEM, and then what do you think the bad things are that we're currently using for education?
So I want to start off by saying, in my personal opinion, I don't think I think you build some skills in elementary and middle school, but I think the real work gets done in high school. Um, because, you basically just redo everything you did in middle school and high school. And granted, like it is easier a second time. But I think to me it seems like the focus should be on high schools. Um, and I think one of the biggest issues with STEM education is it's not um, consistent across the country. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
very dependent on the communities that's in the city, the state, the
Yep.
funding. I mean, the funding is most of it probably, and the availability of people who can teach it. And I was actually lucky enough to come from a high school that was very into STEM and have become
Mm-hmm.
more into STEM as since I've left, and they've gotten a ton of like STEM grants. And I went back to visit recently, and they completely remodeled. They have like a drone building class now. You build your
Oh.
own drone and like you can race it. They have a fab lab, fabrication lab. You can build shit. Like it's insane. They got a bunch of these grants so they can build this technology, but like not every school can do that. Um, so I think the biggest issue in America is that lack of consistency and funding,
Mm-hmm.
and that's most of it in my eyes.
Okay, yeah,
For
because then
me,
that's kind of more of like a sociology issue almost then.
Yeah,
you know,
That,
yeah,
yeah.
for me, like I mean, my school was pretty small. I mean, Dane's was even smaller, so we didn't really have a lot of access to that type of thing. Like we had
yeah.
one engineering course, but the teacher's a dick, so I didn't take it. um, but I also like find another part that's really fascinating is like what type of people are targeted for those type of degrees, and like the moment that like you decide that you want to go into STEM, and like if that relates to gender, and if there's like something in our society where we're like pushing like maybe subconsciously like men more towards STEM like over women. And obviously there's been
Mm-hmm.
a bigger push to get more women into STEM
Yeah,
now
yeah.
last couple of years. But just like that argument of like, is it because we're like we give boys like, rocket ships as a kid and girls
Mm-hmm.
Barbies, or if it's like more something like what Dayton was saying, where it's just like everyone kind of gets an education. I mean, good or bad, and like some people just kind of stick to it.
Mm,
It's an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because I know at least for my high school, like we had plenty of AP classes, on both STEM and then also like the humanities side of it. And actually I think I took all the STEM related ones, but we didn't have any like engineering classes or anything like that. And then also we could dual enroll and go to like the local college and take classes there, but that was incredibly rare and kind of similar to the Jacobs issue. It wasn't funded very well, so we couldn't, like, the school would maybe pay for like a quarter to half of what like the college course would cost, but like it was a private university or private college, so it was like still like $3,000 or $4,000 for a single
Was
class.
it Hope?
Yeah, it was Hope.
Uh, yeah, we had that program with Baker College, which is a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
it
Yeah,
was
my school
actually
too.
reasonable to do. It
Mhm.
was like $400 a class or something.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
like
that is
it counts as
significantly
college
cheaper.
credit when you're done, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
Like I feel like, I mean, okay, what is STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like science and math are pretty much fine. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
I see most schools get up to calc, pre-calc, you know, which is enough probably before college, and then science usually you have biology, chemistry, physics, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's I think that the technology and engineering that's lacking in high schools, and that's the problem where you do that. Those things need funding. I mean, engineering maybe not as much depending on what kind of course it is, but the technology side of things, you literally need the technology. Um, so
Yeah. So I kind of disagree with what you said that like elementary and middle school doesn't matter as much
okay,
because I kind of view it as like building a house, and to build a house you first need like your foundation, and like that's kind of like elementary school, like you're still learning how to do the the basics of math and writing and stuff like that. Kind of like with Max's thing, it's like you're learning how to add like the zeros and ones together, right? And
yeah,
then middle school comes along, and then you're kind of putting up like the 2x4s and framing the house and everything like that. And then by the time you get to high school, then you're actually like putting the drywall up and making it look nice and everything like that.
yeah,
So I think that with kind of like relating to STEM, you have science and math, and those are what are taught in like high school and middle school and stuff like that to like a higher level. And you really need both of those pretty you need them to be pretty sound in order to one understand technology and engineering, and then also to even make new things in the technology and engineering field. So
yeah.
it's I think
I
that's
I
part of
I
the reason
I
why.
agree with that. I guess I'm more coming from like if I had a bunch of money and I'd choose where to put it, I'd put it into high schools first. I guess is where I'm
mm,
more coming from.
yeah, I mean high schools do cost more money too because of
Yeah.
like the labs and stuff for chemistry, and then for like art classes for like your ceramics classes and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Max, what about you? What was your experience?
I'm a little bit in the same boat as you, Jacob, with maybe there needs to be more funding. I feel like my high school did really well on a lot of that stuff in terms of like you were talking about doing AP classes and things like that. But I
Mhm.
also know I went to a high school that was pretty well known, at least in the area, for
Mm,
offering a lot of that stuff. So it's a bit harder for me to say anything negative about it or anything that's really missing.
Mhm.
So I
yeah,
feel like I had it pretty well.
yeah. I think a big thing too. So when I did visit, the reason I was visiting is because it was registration time and it was convincing or seeing the students were interested in taking AP Chem, right?
Mhm.
And I was talking to some students, and the most important thing to me in high school, or one of the important things, is getting that diversity of like just trying stuff and seeing if you like it,
Mhm.
you know? And I think that depends on how what's required to graduate in high school. Like how many free credits do kids have to try
Yeah.
out things they might like, and
Yeah.
if you want to get more kids into STEM at college, we would want them to try some of it in high school, see if they like it or not. Because if they don't even know what it is, or if they've never tried it, they're probably not gonna pick it for their major.
Mhm.
So I think having that diversity of different topics they can at least sample for even a semester,
Mhm.
I think is really important too.
I mean, it's also nice because you also know what you don't like too.
Yeah,
Maybe try
yeah,
it. I mean, worst case. I mean, I think it's also though hard if you're 16 or 17 picking a class and you're not really thinking, oh, I'm gonna see if I want to do this for a career. You're gonna try to.
yeah.
A lot of people will try and avoid those classes, and even in college, there's like some classes like I don't want to fucking take this.
But at least in high school, it's free. That's the big difference. In high
Right.
school,
Mhm.
Yeah,
in college, if you want to try stuff, you totally can, but it'll cost you money. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And you better hope that it counts for a course credit or something like that,
yeah,
or
for
like something
electives.
like for your degree. Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Where in high school, I feel like you have a little bit more flexibility, hopefully.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, going back to what you were saying earlier, Gabe, with the like bias, if there's a gender bias or just cultural bias, there probably is. Still, I know, like you're saying, it is getting better. I know colleges in particular are really pushing for more women in STEM.
I mean, our school
Schools are too.
definitely is.
Yeah, Michigan Tech, like yeah, that was one of their big initiatives, which is great. And they do a lot of outreach to going to schools and doing experiments with students. Like, hey, like this is what this is. Like, see if you like it.
Mhm.
Um, and I hope that is getting better, and I hope teachers aren't. I hope there isn't like an old like curmudgeonly counselor. It's like, oh, you're a woman. Oh, you don't need to take engineering in high school.
Right, yeah.
Mhm.
I'm
We
sure
hope
it
that isn't the
happens though.
case. I'm sure it happens, which is shitty, but I think that over time culture will hopefully adjust. But I think at the end of the day, to me, it seems like it is showing students different things and seeing how they feel about it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they never see it, they'll never know.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
might cost money to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to like go into college with a degree.
Mhm.
Like, I know there was like at one point I thought about doing electrical engineering, and I took a class like in electronics, and I was like, this isn't as fun as I thought it was gonna be. So I mean, I'm glad I did, because I mean, I originally, like, the first time I like sent in my newsletter for tech or whatever, like they had me down as like an EE, and I was just like, I just can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got by in a lot of those electrical engineering classes, and most of them I did not like.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the first couple were okay, but it got bad really fast for me.
And I mean, I started out computer science, and I think the only computer science course they offered was through that local college, and it just like didn't work with my schedule or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, again, it would have been nice to take it and be like, okay, maybe do something different, but I don't know, my life could be a lot different too, because I could have went to a different school and all that stuff. So.
Yep.
And do you have any other things you're thinking about as good and bad stuff that's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're getting kind of late here, and I don't want to open up a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
But I was kind of thinking about, like, specifically for classes, like how professors or teachers go about teaching students the topics or the theories and stuff like that.
You're saying like the teaching itself?
Yeah, like the methods. Like, I don't think I disagree very much with having classes where it's like, this is specifically for STEM classes, where you have to like memorize like equations and stuff like that, because you never have to memorize an equation at work. It's like
Just
I can
Google it, or there's a calculator for it.
Yeah, it's like I can understand why you might need to. You're saying like a prof says like, don't use like Wolfram Alpha or something like that to like solve this like integral, because I think it can be important to learn the foundation of, you know, where integrals and derivatives come from and stuff like that. But after a certain point, it's just like there's literally no point in doing those by hand anymore.
Yep.
Like you don't see us like doing flashcards for like 24 times 15 or whatever like that. Like no, it's like we just put them in a calculator. But like back in like third or fourth grade, that's on like a timetable or whatever you want to call it. So
I definitely have a fair share of that too on my field. Like subnetting is like how you break up network addresses, and they were really hard on like memorizing it. And it's nice to have them like in the back of your head, and we like practice like filling them out for like large ass networks. My first internship since on, there's a calculator for it. Like it'll do it for you. Like, how many computers do you want to hook up? Okay, it'll do it for you. Like it's kind of a waste of time,
because it's a lot more efficient in the workplace to do that. It's like, okay, well, now we don't need to teach these people or we don't need to spend the time to make these people memorize all this shit. Here, I just wrote this program, now it does it for you.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to know where it's coming from, like you were saying, like to have the basis, but like we definitely spent more time on it than I'll ever get that use back out of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a conversation there that we don't have time for right now, but yeah, I agree that the teaching methods could probably be updated a little bit, but that's just a cultural thing too. So
yep,
it also goes by teacher too. I'm sure there are some teachers out there or profs out there that are doing it completely differently, and I mean, good or bad. I mean, they could be making it. You know,
I was thinking I think yesterday, like, remember when smart boards were everywhere?
Oh yeah.
And now like they're not
all over
anywhere at all.
my middle and high schools.
Yeah. And then when I went back, I didn't see one.
I remember those.
Yeah. All right, well, that's our episode. I think it was a really solid STEM topics, guys. Thank you for bringing some good ones, and thanks, Max, for joining us and telling us your expertise.
Of course.
Again, our show comes out every Monday on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram for some funny stuff. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.